Quarantine day 1326, I think. And I don't know about you, but I have just been existing in track pants. I'm embracing the Hollywood stereotype of my Balkan roots. So, Bog, ja sam Ivan, drago mi je. Huh? That's Serbian. In this episode, we're going to touch on timbre and motif. Timbre is pretty simple to tackle. It's literally just the voice or color of the instrument you're playing. For instance, violin, viola, cello, and bass are all stringed instruments with different timbres. Now, timbre isn't meant to mean the specific instrument, of course, but rather the sound perception for which the composer is looking. I might say this section needs a booming timbre, and that could mean a number of things. It could mean timpani, tuba, bass, maybe even cello. So timbre is really just a fancy way to express tone quality. But now the meat of this episode will focus on motif. You see, motif is the overall artistic style or styles applied to the piece. It's easy to overthink this concept, but basically you know motif when you hear it. And you probably hear it the most when you watch a movie. So considering that, let's think about the music of Indiana Jones. Indy's theme, or motif, has lots of triumphant timbres expressed with brass. Trumpets, trombones, various types of horns engage in major scale brass melodies, which we in the West associate with excitement and adventure. So those timbres provoke a feeling of excitement in us. And continuing in that Indiana Jones vein, his adventures often occur in locations that aren't in a familiar Western setting. And this means other motifs need to get introduced that evoke a foreign or maybe exotic feeling to our Western ears. For instance, John Williams, the composer, might infuse some harmonic minors into a piece to give it a more Middle Eastern feeling, because that might be the setting for the narrative moment that song plays in. Another more controversial example is from the initial religious ceremony in the Temple of Doom. The underlying motif is a very Western sounding choir piece that's reminiscent of what you might hear in like a traditional Catholic service or perhaps even a classical requiem. This evokes a feeling of the sacred to a Western audience, but it also failed to utilize a more culturally and narratively authentic South Asian musical motif and timbre. So if you were to listen to the vocal style of someone like Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan and then listen to the song Temple of Doom, you'd kind of get an idea of the style difference between the two. Now this is a very minor critique, but it's a good example of how a motif might forego an opportunity to be more narratively authentic in lieu of conveying an idea by using musical references that are more familiar to a specific audience. Motif, much like timbre, conveys musical feeling and energy. Now, these words aren't synonyms, but they kind of exist in the same musical family. So I think the best way to go forward with this is we just take these ideas into the music room and see what happens. Hey, what's going on? All right, so I've basically written the whole thing already. Sorry, behind the scenes, spoiler alert. This is a thing I worked on pretty much all last weekend. I got about 9 minutes done. Now, at this point, I still have to tighten a lot of things up, line up some parts, get the tempos correctly. So it's not a completed project, but the bones of the architecture are completed. So I'm going to go over this first. I want to say it's like 30 seconds going into like a piano solo section, and kind of talk about timbre and motif. So the first little bit, initially you heard, and I'll mute these little extra parts that you're gonna absolutely love. Initially you really just heard. So I think there's a third, here I'll solo them out. So I think the first thing you heard last week was the then there's the complementary part, which is harmonizing with the initial cello line. Oh, I'm sorry, hold on. This is the complementary part. It's also a mark. It's a 3-part. So you have that with the initial melody. But to add some depth to it, I also added a different timbre, which is being completed by a double bass or bass, you know, not this kind of bass, but this kind of bass. Although I guess it doesn't matter. Very simple. Like when you hear that, it's like, oh wow, classical music is simple, and it's not the individual part. Lesson on teamwork if you wanted to do something like that, but it's all the parts together. So right now your motif is probably something like a plotting kind of idea where it's like marching. You know, it's got this kind of like rhythmic tempo to it. And it's kind of interesting. So what we go to from here is I actually have these rundowns. Let me unmute them. Okay, so those first are they're violins, and what is it? It's I can't remember the specific name of it. They're called a trill halftone. So I guess I could have come up with that. So trill is kind of the how you would describe the timbre. I need something trill. And then the rundown lets you know we're frickin' starting, bro. Right? That's what Mozart probably said. We're frickin' starting, bro. And so that's kind of like what happened. And I say Mozart, but I've been listening to a lot of Bach lately. I don't think Bach would have said we're frickin' starting, bro. But Mozart was a drunk, so he might have. But it would have been in German, so it would have been like, I can't speak German. So here's this. This is kind of nice. This is giving you a sense of a beginning, motif of beginning, and then things are getting serious, y'all. And what I did here is I took the trill halftone, this sound here, but then I basically finished it off with this really big orchestral tone. So I'm gonna really give it some volume because I love this. Might be my favorite part of the whole symphony, although I really like the end too, which we'll get to at a later episode. And really, per episode, we're just going to kind of be going through parts as I kind of fix things. This first part is pretty much fixed and ready to go. So it's like I work on it as I compose it. So I don't know if that's the right way to do it or not, but it's the way I do it. So here we have the walk down. It's a minor walk down in the key of C, if you care, into these big, the full orchestra playing literally one note. And then into someone outside's honking their horn. Honk your horn all you want. Just social distance. Oh, that guy's riding a giant bike. Anyways, so it's the minor walk down into just the full orchestra literally playing the note C. Literally. I say that. It's channeling Chris Traeger. By itself, it's big. Beautiful, but it's missing a little bit of the So you're starting to see a little bit how like the plotting and the marching motif of the initial melody and harmony is complemented by this. This by itself sounds kind of cool, like a Star Wars thing, but it wouldn't be. You want it to go somewhere. It needs other things involved in the tone and in the color of it to really make you feel like you're experiencing the musical story that's being told. So, anyways, and then we quiet down, but there's still, you can hear that. It kind of like quietly goes in, so it goes from these big booming, like these big booming, scary orchestral tones into a single note, also playing. It's the whole orchestra playing, but it's playing more quietly with less velocity. And then we have this piano, and the piano is two parts, and I split it up because I only have so many keys, and I can't. If I had a full grand, which I have, like grand size keyboard back here, but it doesn't connect to the computer. At least not. It doesn't matter. You don't care. So we have the rhythm, like the bass rhythm, which is. And then complementing that, and I'll just single this out. You're really seeing how the sausage is made, people. So you have that. It's very. So this feels like the initial part of it kind of felt, the whole thing feels a little bit like a journey. And the initial part of it has this kind of excitement to it, right? Where you're getting on the march, you're getting on the, you're getting on your horse or your carriage or your motorcycle or whatever. And then this part is kind of like you're in the middle journey now. And that's kind of the idea, right? So you're going up to a place. The initial part is the excitement of going it. This is more the like settling into it, the contentment of it. And you mix them together. And then this is a complementary pizzicato part, which is pretty short in the scheme of things, because what I did is I came from the big booming orchestra tone, brought that down, reduced the velocity so it's kind of quiet and just kind of in the background, filling out the background. But then I wanted to give it a little bit of a rhythmed tempo as this is going that kind of counterbalances the ding, 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 which that feels like a clock. And this feels more like actual walking or riding. Hold on, let me start that from the beginning. And that's that whole part, but you mix them all together, you have the nice symphony in the background, or the orchestra in the background, all the kind of like the other instruments playing quietly in the background, but together it sounds like this. It's pretty. Have the orchestra actually backing out, so it's just the piano and the pizzicato part. And then back comes in the symphony, because the symphony is about to take over this section. have this climbing where the consistency throughout this whole section of the piece is that bass end, that bass clef of the piano, the kind of chording, the rolling chords, and then the treble side, or the higher melody side, is actually taking you somewhere. And then you have the complementing pieces, which is at the beginning you have a quiet symphony that's kind of just filling out the background, existing, kind of painting the mountains in the back, if you will. And then the symphony comes back in, almost exposing the horizon of what's to come. You see and feel the swelling, it's kind of filling up the view, and suddenly the piano starts to become an afterthought, and that's the idea, right? The piano is like struggling to survive, but eventually it's going to get overtaken by the whole orchestra. And that's like, it's this kind of dance of all the instruments. Eventually, and then we're breathing. But that's where we're also stopping, because I don't want to burn all this. But that's the first 2 minutes of the song. I don't want to burn through all the whole thing. So let's just kind of review very quickly what it all sounds like. We're starting, bro. We're starting. And if you were confused about the starting, just to remind you, and I'm going to give you one more reminder, but this reminder is going to be a little more firm that we're starting. This is the beginning. Here it comes. You need to remember those punchy notes, because that's something that comes back in the piece later on, because it's a motif. See, the punches became tickles. This is my own vernacular for music. Getting free. This is bonus conducting lessons. I don't know how to conduct. And then we do a subtle shift in the tone, or the timbre of the tone. Hear the symphony coming in to the back, from the background, starting to push its way back into the foreground, because again we're gonna need a breath in a moment, and that's what the symphony is signaling to you, or the orchestra is signaling to you. It's saying, get out of the way, piano, it's time for a frickin' breather. Oh, thank God we have our breather. And that's where I'll leave you for this lesson. Live from the Balkans.